He turned toward the spirit, his voice calm, but carrying absolute authority. That stone soul, he said, leaving no room for doubt, is the seed itself. Lesser, cast the blessing now. Immediately, at his command, the fairy sucked in a sharp breath, then quickly bowed her head. I understand. Lesser rose into the air and began to weave her magic over the fading guardian with delicate, glowing hands. Streams of golden light burst through the darkness, washing over the ruined swamp and filling that dead, desolate place with a sacred radiance. From the shattered remains of the old shell, cracks spread wider and wider, and new life suddenly surged upward. Granfel's eyes widened as he stared at the scene before him, witnessing a miracle so unbelievable it seemed to defy all reason. This is the World Tree. At that exact moment, a translucent system window quietly materialized before him in midair. You have entered the secret garden of the World Tree. In that instant, a brand new legend quietly took root on the continent of Akina. As Granfell read through the notification, another message suddenly rang out across the world, powerful enough to shake every player to the core. The continent welcomes the birth of a new World Tree. Meanwhile, on Weigang's side, the very moment that wave of life energy swept across the land, he grabbed his head in complete disbelief, as if his brain had stopped working. What the hell is this? A World Tree? The chat logs exploded so fast they were almost impossible to read. While the Weigang crew was out there grinding snails, somebody else just triggered a world-class event. Ryo Hun clenched his teeth so hard his jaw twitched. I'd bet my life on it. This has to be Granfell again. Back at the swamp, the rift finally collapsed in on itself and disappeared. Granfell let out a faint smirk. The distortion has vanished. Without even turning around, he gave an order to his spirit companion in the same cool, detached tone as always. Scout the situation in Akina and report back to me. The mechanical tower will serve as your base of operations. The spirit lowered her head deeply. I will repay your trust, Lord Hone. As Granfell teleported back to his quarters, one thought kept circling in his mind. That little spirit really is intense. She handled my mana as if it were her own, using it with terrifying precision and almost absurd efficiency. But then Granfell suddenly froze in place. A realization hit him like a hammer. The achievements he had just earned were echoing all across the continent. A new title unlocked. You have received the title, The Last Adventurer. And then, without warning, his consciousness slipped away, sinking into total darkness. This was the very peak of an overwhelming mana-leveling experience. His eyes snapped open all at once. He stared up at the familiar ceiling above him, blinking slowly as his thoughts struggled to catch up. Where am I? His gaze moved around the room. My house. Confusion rushed in. Did I fall asleep? Was all of that just a dream? Li Hone hurriedly pulled up his status window with trembling hands. The moment it appeared, his eyes locked onto the glowing line of text. The Last Adventurer. A jolt of adrenaline shot through his entire body. It wasn't a dream. It was real. In Aina, obtaining a title was something so rare it was almost considered impossible. Burning with curiosity, he immediately tapped the screen. What kind of buff does it give? But before he could check, a green parrot wearing a tiny hat suddenly popped out of the interface. The bird screeched loudly from the window itself. Co-Chief Researcher Li Hone. Li Hone flinched hard. What? The parrot flapped its wings and squawked back. There you are. I'm here to drag you back to the regular meeting. Regular meeting? He repeated, but then it suddenly clicked. Right. It had been postponed ever since Ban went missing. I need to get back to the mission. Trying to steady himself, he asked the bird, when is it? The reply came back sharp and immediate. 2 hours. You've been missing for 3 whole days. We were worried sick, but thank goodness you're still alive. On the outside, Granfell's face stayed as cold and unreadable as carved stone. Inside, Li Hone was screaming like a volcano on the verge of erupting. While furiously brushing his teeth, he forced out a reply to the bird. Understood. I shall make my appearance. The bird gave a quick salute. Yes, sir. As he got himself ready, one thought lingered heavily in his head. 3 days unconscious. Manifesting that spirit took far more out of me than I expected. Then the scene shifted to the assembly hall. Bang stood before the council, posture straight. doing his best to appear composed under all those watching eyes. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you all. Polite applause spread through the hall. Amid the clapping, Yusra leaned over and whispered, "Did Senior Bangriz really prepare all of that by himself?" Marcelo nodded with open approval as the young mage returned to his seat, clearly satisfied with what he had seen. "Excellent work, Brit," someone said, and the boy immediately blushed. "Thank you." Beside him, Granfell sat with a neat stack of papers in hand, his mere presence commanding the room. Then he announced the next speaker in a calm voice. "Next up, Head of Curse Magic, Kiko Armin." The room instantly erupted into uneasy murmurs, the atmosphere shifting in a way that was impossible to ignore. Curse magic? That old, outdated discipline. Li Hon quietly studied the sudden change in mood. Curse magic was certainly rare, but why did everyone call her the black hole of the magic tower? As she slowly approached the stage, Li Hon realized something that made him uneasy. Even the elders weren't spared from the merciless judgment of the Golden Hall. "I've got a bad feeling about this." The purple-haired mage adjusted her glasses, and when she finally spoke, her voice was soaked in gloom. "I am a parasite." Granfell only stared at her blankly, but Marcelo shot up from his seat in panic. "Oh no. Senior Paranoia's episode is starting again. She won't be able to finish like this. Get her back to her seat." Paranoia screamed, while two mages grabbed her by the arms and tried to pull her away. "I'm a black hole sucking the tower's budget dry. I'm trash. Absolute garbage." The mage on her left struggled to hold on to her. "Please calm down, Senior Kiko. Let's go, Senior." Her cries of trash echoed all the way down the hall. Marcelo let out a tired sigh and closed his files. Well, that was the final presentation. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Li Hon watched the whole thing in stunned disbelief. They seriously consider this a successful meeting? Then, just as he was trying to process it, a voice pulled him out of his thoughts. "Lord Hone," Marcelo said with a warm, almost eager smile. "Shall we have some tea? I have excellent news." Li Hon lifted an eyebrow. "Good news in this mana-crazed universe? That's rare." "Certainly," he answered. "I have matters to discuss as well." The scene cut to the Hanging Gardens. Marcelo sprayed his tea everywhere. The World Tree. Granfell calmly wiped a stray drop from the table, completely unfazed by the reaction. "Correct," he said simply. Marcelo stammered, still trying to recover. "And you also obtained information regarding the continent." Granfell gave a small nod, his composure never cracking. "Precisely." Granfell took another elegant sip of tea while reviewing the system data in his mind. It is merely one of many seeds. Yet when he spoke aloud, his tone turned grave and certain. The energy of life will always rise again to resist extinction. Marcelo could not hide the trembling in his hands anymore, no matter how hard he tried to keep his dignity intact. The World Tree was the legendary sovereign of Akina, Marcelo explained, his voice shaking with emotion. When it fell, demonic forces surged in strength. But with the seed you planted, the balance of power may finally shift again. He scratched the back of his head and laughed nervously. "This is truly miraculous news. I don't even know how the tower could ever repay you for this." Li Hon quietly wondered, "Is it really that huge of a deal?" Granfell gently set down his cup and looked at Marcelo. "You mentioned that you had good news for me." Marcelo hesitated for a moment, clearly weighing his words. "Compared to what you've just revealed, this may seem insignificant," he admitted, then leaned forward and spoke in a quick, lowered voice. "Mages no longer need an elder's permission to leave the tower." On the surface, Granfell simply sipped his tea with the polished grace of a nobleman. Deep inside, though, Li Hoyle's soul was nearly choking from sheer disbelief. Marcelo continued his report with a grave, deliberate seriousness, as if every word carried real political weight. "For now, that freedom is limited to those assigned to the investigation of Karim Jeva," he explained. "But once the matter is settled with the Chief Mage's support, the tower will grant you full authority over the dimensional rifts." Then he dropped the true bombshell without blinking. "Naturally, that authority also extends to you, Li Hoyle, as my co-chief mage." Inside, Li Hoyle's eyes practically turned into shining coins. "This is insane. They called it a simple convenience, but for a player like me, this is basically a free pass." unlimited access to the magic tower's rifts. In this absurd mana-ruled life, I just hit the jackpot. Thank you, system. Even so, Granfel's expression remained perfectly cold and unreadable, as if none of it mattered. Is that all? Granfell asked evenly. Have you located Kareem Jeva? Inside, Lee Hoyle was screaming. Is that all? That tone is perfect. That's exactly how a real powerhouse would react. Keep it cool. Keep it classy. Across from him, Marcelo clasped his hands tightly together, his face growing noticeably darker. No, Marcelo admitted at last. The two captured elders refused to say anything. However, no one can endure in prison forever. We will get answers soon. Granfell fell into thought. I feel like I've heard of that place before. But before he could follow the thread any further, a desperate shout suddenly tore through the calm, refined atmosphere of the garden. Lord Marcello, a young mage, came rushing in, breathless and pale, as though he had sprinted there without stopping. Forgive the interruption, but this is a code-red emergency. The two elders and prison. He could barely force the words out. The news hit Granfell and Marcello like a physical blow, draining the air from the moment. The scene shifted to the magic tower itself, a colossal fortress built atop endless layers of mana, its roots stretching deep into the very source of magic. For centuries it had stood unshaken, a place so ancient and absolute that it felt like time itself had stopped breathing inside its walls. The abyssal void, better known simply as Granfell and Marcello stepped into that oppressive darkness together, crossing the threshold into a place that seemed to reject ordinary life. Guided by the trembling novice, Granfell slowly swept his gaze across the void. So this is he thought, measuring the heavy silence around him. And we're only at the entrance. Even a single second in that place felt stretched into a century, thick and suffocating. Lee Hoyle's inner geek couldn't help but react. Wait, isn't this basically the room of spirit and time? Then the young mage suddenly let out a blood-curdling scream. Ahead of them lay two charred corpses, their bodies still being eaten by a fire that refused to die. Marcello's voice shook despite himself. Are you telling me these things used to be the elders? What in the world is happening here? The novice staggered back in terror, his face drained white. I don't know. I sensed a mana anomaly, came to investigate, and found this. Granfell said nothing at first, studying the gruesome scene with hard, emotionless logic. Did they try to escape and fail? No. Impossible. Humans can't properly channel mana inside him. And this is only the threshold, not even the deepest layer. His eyes remained fixed on the strange inferno, searching for the hidden rule behind it. There was no way they could have concealed this kind of power so completely. So how did it happen? As that thought formed, the flames suddenly snapped upward into the air like living whips, startling all three of them at once. Marcello instantly lunged forward and shouted, "Where is this coming from?" I'll erect a barrier. A shimmering green shield flashed into existence, expanding around the blaze in a desperate attempt to contain it. But in the very next heartbeat, the crimson flames devoured the barrier as if it were no more than paper. Granfell's eyes widened for the first time. It erased Marcello's barrier instantly. Then, boom, a staff crashed down against the ground with the crushing force of a mountain. A wave of absolute zero magic burst outward in all directions, and the raging fire was smothered in a single breath, replaced by deadly stillness. Granfell was genuinely stunned, if only for a moment. One strike, and the fire was gone, buried beneath ice. Even the young mage stood there slack-jawed in complete shock. Lord Senios, he whispered. A hooded figure stood in the spreading frost, radiating overwhelming power that seemed to press down on the room. It is Kareem Jeva's magic, Senios said calmly, lifting his head just enough to reveal mystical blue eyes and a faint, bitter smile. He intended to silence them before any of his secrets could escape. To leave behind a trap like this, Senios murmured, his voice edged with contempt. He truly does look down on the magic tower. Granfell immediately recognized the presence before him. This was the mysterious hooded man from the council meeting. So this is my first time seeing an elder-class mage in real action, Lee Hoyle thought, unable to hide his fascination beneath Granfell's calm exterior. Marcello and the novice both bowed deeply, their respect immediate and absolute. Lord Senios, I have no excuses, Marcelo said. You entrusted the prisoners to me, and I allowed this catastrophe to happen. Senios slowly shook his head. Raise your head, Marcelo. How could you alone have outplayed the cunning of Karim Jeva? His mana signature has already vanished, Senios continued. Tracking him now will be difficult. Then his piercing gaze shifted to the protagonist. Lee Hoyle, there is something I must discuss with you. Will you speak with me in private? A system window chimed sharply into existence. Quest received, Senios' request. The elder personally led Granfell to a secluded chamber, far removed from the noise and tension of the prison. Senios began to speak, his voice low and heavy with years of buried history. Karim Jeva, he said, and the name alone seemed to chill the air. He was the very reason I entered the magic tower. In his mind flashed the image of a mage wrapped in devastating flames, standing like a living disaster. They called him Karim Jeva, Senios went on. And for someone like me, who sought the absolute peak of ice magic, he was the mountain I had no choice but to climb. A voice from the distant past seemed to echo in the room itself. I wanted to freeze, even fire. Granfell listened without interruption, fully absorbed in the story of that long, bitter rivalry. I drove myself to the brink, Senios said quietly. And eventually, I reached his level. I became an elder. In memory, he saw himself always one step behind Karim Jeva, forever standing in the shadow that man cast. But in the end, I never surpassed him, Senios admitted with a tired sigh. To be honest, I never truly believed I could, he confessed. But after seeing what things have become, all that remains in me now is regret. His tone hardened after that, and a thick tension quietly settled over the room. Lee Hoyle, he said slowly, each word deliberate. What I want now is something that only you can accomplish. Elsewhere, in a wasteland swallowed by hellfire, a mage stood triumphant in a blood-red aura, as though the burning world itself had crowned him king. A sinister grin twisted across his face while the land burned around him without end. In his laughter danced visions of Earth itself drowning beneath crimson magic, as if he could already see the future he wanted. Finally, everything is in place. Karim Jeva raised both hands and began to channel a demonic ritual, his power swelling with terrifying certainty. The sky split open, jagged and violent, and a demon king descended through the tear. A voice whispered through the chaos, almost reverent. At last, I have reached the truth. Meanwhile, in the real world, the game operations center erupted into complete panic. What is that? One administrator screamed. What the hell is going on? Sirens wailed through the building, sharp enough to tear through everyone's nerves. Emergency code read. This is not a drill. Back in the tower, Senios looked straight at Granfell and asked in a quiet, unwavering voice, "Will you accept my request?" Granfell gave no answer right away. Sunlight streamed in through the windows, casting his tall silhouette in bright gold and making his silence feel even heavier. He walked slowly down the corridor afterward, turning the elder's words over and over in his mind. He remembered his ultimate mission with perfect clarity: rebuild the magic tower and eliminate the traitor, Karim Jeva. Then everything clicked into place. This isn't just about duty. It isn't only about protecting the tower either. This is a full-blown main quest scenario. Granfell opened the door, a grim and steady determination settling over him like armor. It felt strangely like the calm after a storm, the kind of silence that comes with a harsh but welcome sense of freedom. He sat down at last, his mind racing through possibilities, already preparing for what had to come next. But more importantly than anything else, there was the tower's elder, Karim Jeva himself. Just thinking about that name made the weight of the situation feel even heavier. The information on him was frustratingly scarce. He was the kind of super rare NPC players almost never got to study properly, and yet everyone who had ever crossed paths with him always came back saying the exact same thing. There is nothing in existence that his fire cannot burn. And somehow, I'm supposed to fight that monster. Inside, Lee Hoyle was practically tearing his hair out, his face going purple with raw panic and disbelief. That bastard's fire melted a high-tier barrier like it was nothing. Panic began to crawl into his chest as he calculated his own miserable odds of survival in this brutal, mana-soaked world. A wave of depression hit him hard. Even if he upgraded his Predator pack, it still wouldn't put him anywhere near the level of a Chief Mage. And the rewards he had right now? Useless trash. No matter how much he tried to prepare, the whole situation still felt hopeless. Just as he was sinking deeper into frustration, his phone suddenly buzzed and cut through the silence. Nam Keelman. Why on earth did he send 15 files all at once? He tapped the screen, and a flood of KSB headlines burst into view before his eyes. The North Pole was on fire. A crimson star was blotting out the sky. Scientists were baffled and visibly terrified by the anomaly. What the hell is this? One report practically screamed. In the forbidden zones, chaos had already broken out. Molten lava was pouring down from frozen glacial peaks. Recon planes were being swatted out of the sky like flies. This was no ordinary natural disaster. It was a full-scale catastrophe. His eyes stayed locked on the screen, his mind racing to make sense of this insane mana-world scenario, when suddenly a scream tore through the air. It was Lee Hoyle's crystal communication link. Marcello's face flickered into view, twisted by sheer terror and urgency. Abnormal mana spikes at the North Pole. Get to the Topaz Hall right now. By the time he arrived at the tower, the atmosphere there was already suffocatingly tense. A red-haired mage gave voice to the fear hanging over everyone in the room. This energy signature, there's no mistaking it. It belongs to the chief fire mage, Kareem Jeva. The output is completely off the charts, Mathis confirmed grimly, his face hard with unease. He specializes in fire magic, so the match makes sense, Mathis said. But then Vangrith Tom cut in, his voice darker than before. What about the corruption mixed into it? We felt this same vile aura when we investigated Kareem's estate. That place felt like the nest of a demon. It feels even darker now. Older, too. Just then, the doors swung open with force. Granfell strode in beside Marcello, and the whole room instinctively went still. Kareem Jeva is attempting to tear open a dimensional rift. Dimitri gasped at their sudden entrance, but Granfell didn't waste even a second. His goal isn't simple destruction. He intends to summon a high-ranking demon lord. The blonde mage recoiled in horror. A high demon lord? But the purple-haired mage frowned and scoffed, unable to follow the logic. What does a rift have to do with summoning a demon? Granfell's shadow stretched long across the floor as he answered with brutal calm. A summoning requires a vessel, he said coldly, and the fuel needed to shape that vessel is human life. Corpses. Death harvested on a global scale, enough to drown the world and sacrifice. He needs the rifts to collapse at the same time. Kareem has already prepared 11 unstable points across the earth. Total collapse begins in 13 hours. Granfell slammed a photograph down onto the table with a sharp, heavy sound. The room broke into hushed panic at once. So Kareem really did fall into darkness. 11 rifts? Others stared at the device and its glowing rectangular screen in total confusion. The resolution is unbelievably clear. What kind of artifact even is that? Granfell let out a silent mental sigh. It's a portable projector, you medieval nerds. Out loud, however, he brought the room back under control at once. Focus. We deal with the threat first. Time is a luxury we do not have. His tone turned even sharper. I will now assign teams to intercept Kareem Jeva and neutralize the rifts. The moment the rifts begin to tear open, every senior mage will deploy, including Marcello himself. Granfell was about to continue when a hesitant hand slowly rose into view. Excuse me, but Ben Williams stammered nervously. Kareem is a traitor to the tower. As senior mages, it is our duty to execute him. But honestly, he swallowed hard and looked miserable. I'd really rather sit this one out. Granfell stepped closer, his gaze sharp enough to pierce straight through him. Senior Fire Mage Ben William. William flinched on instinct. It's not cowardice, he hurried to explain, but as a fire user facing Kareem, the fear written all over his face said everything. He looked up expecting a harsh rebuke. Instead, Granfell gave a calm, almost cool nod. I understand. The hierarchy of flames is absolute. A weaker fire will always be devoured by a stronger blaze. If you fight Kareem directly, your flames will do nothing but feed his power. The assembled mages could only watch in stunned silence as Granfell broke down the elemental disadvantage with ruthless clarity. However, Granfell said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. There is one mage in this room who can completely nullify that elemental weakness. The hall instantly buzzed with confusion. Who? Marcelo, maybe? The master? Before the speculation could spread further, Granfell pointed straight ahead. Senior mage of curse and enigmatology. Kiko Armin. Kiko froze so completely, it was like her soul had abandoned her body. Every set of eyes in the hall snapped toward her in the same instant. The whispers turned into open gasps, thick with disbelief and badly hidden judgment. Kiko, the tower's budget black hole. That delusional shut-in. The words spread through the room like poison. Her whole body trembled. Why yes. Granfell smiled with a predator's grin. Kiko Armin, your presentation failed the board review, but I read every last word of it. Panic seized her throat. He isn't about to. No, please no. Inside, she was screaming as reality dragged her straight into the spotlight. I'm a parasite, a leech, a waste of tower funds. I'm literal garbage. While she collapsed inward under her own thoughts, Granfell ignored the meltdown completely and declared, her research is the key to bringing down Kareem. We will now review Kiko Armin's thesis, along with her private research diary. Kiko's jaw nearly hit the floor. This was it. The ultimate execution method for an introvert, forced public exposure. Meanwhile, at the frozen edge of the world, crimson light ripped across the sky. Kareem Jeva stood atop the unreachable peaks like a prophet of ruin. Beside him, the demon Akimpatham knelt and admired the destruction below, where rivers of lava bled over endless fields of ice. Isn't it magnificent, Lord Kareem? The traitorous mage cast a cold glance down at him. Akimpatham was it. The demon responded with a twisted grin so vicious it barely looked human. If you keep leaking mana like this, the magic tower will find us sooner or later. Kareem gave a contemptuous scoff. Let them come. Those rats won't change a thing. This sacrifice is the price of truth, is it not? Akimpatham's smile widened until it looked like his face might split apart. Of course, the demon lord will be very pleased. All 11 rifts are primed. But then Kareem's expression suddenly stiffened. The air changed. Something was wrong. Even the demon felt it at once. What is it? Kareem's voice dropped into a dangerous growl. Just now, one of the 11 rifts vanished. The demon's eyes bulged. What? Impossible. Those filthy adventurers can't interfere with a rift that hasn't even fully formed yet. Kareem's thoughts raced in an instant. Is it the tower? No. They shouldn't be able to mobilize that fast. There are only a handful of beings alive who can manipulate my mana. Then the truth struck him like lightning. They aren't merely interfering. They are dismantling the rifts one by one. The demon let out a shrill scream. What? Above them, the sky split open, blinded by a flood of radiant light pouring down from beyond. They all looked up in horror. Akimpatham let out a sharp hiss. A warp gate, space twisted violently overhead, and Marcelo stepped through first. Behind him, the strike team poured into the area and immediately formed a ring, their eyes locking onto the traitor without a hint of hesitation. Brit's voice rang out across the battlefield like a judge delivering a final sentence. We found you, Kareem Jeva. Then Granfell Claudi Arpius Romeo gave the next order with cold, absolute authority. Excellent. Ben, secure the apparatus immediately. Ben reacted at once, his answer coming out with urgent intensity. Understood. Meanwhile, Kareem Jeva stood frozen for a brief moment, unable to fully grasp the impossible scene unfolding in front of him. Beside the demon Akimpatham, he could only stare as the unimaginable became real. Kareem Jeva's voice shook ever so slightly, the disbelief in it impossible to hide. That radiance, he muttered, eyes narrowing. It's the blinding light of pure, undiluted mana. Even as Kareem reeled, Granfell Claudi Arpius Romeo continued directing the battle without pause, firing off commands to Mathis before turning at once to the next caster in line. Kiko Armin, trembling so hard it looked like she might collapse, pressed her enchanted quill against the surface of her grimoire. Will this really work? She whispered, barely able to breathe. Azure sparks crackled wildly around Kiko's notebook, building into a violent storm of magical energy that swirled all around her. As the pages began turning on their own, Kareem Jeva's eyes widened in genuine alarm as he finally understood the structure of the strategy they had built against him. Granfell Claudi Arpius Romeo's theory sliced through the chaos with terrifying clarity, as sharp and precise as a blade. Standard enchantment binds magic to physical objects, he stated, even as the sinister glow of dark magic surfaced in the formation. But now consider this. What happens if we enchant magic into magic itself? The answer hung in the air like a threat. On the flank, Marcelo released his own arcane power. His silhouette was drenched in an ethereal blue aura so brilliant that it pushed back the surrounding darkness and lit the battlefield in cold light. The structure is stable. Using Marcelo's theoretical framework as the foundation and Ben's pure mana as the catalyst, we fuse the spell directly into Mathis's dark magic. Kiko's eyes went wide as tears streamed down her face under the crushing pressure. Still, Granfell Claudi Arpius Romeo calmly continued to conduct the entire storm of power like a battlefield symphony. Next, Narthro. At his command, yet another veteran mage fed their mana into the growing spell. Hearing his name, Narthro roared back without hesitation. Yes. The combined magic swelled into a torrent of destructive force so dense it made the air scream. Even then, Granfell Claudi Arpius Romeo did not stop, signaling the next mages in perfect sequence. Next, rocks. Then Booyah. Finally, if we amplify the core with fire magic, something already volatile and immense, the reaction will become catastrophic. At last, Granfell Claudi Arpius Romeo signaled the final stage. Ben William answered instantly. It is done. Kareem Jeva could only stare in stunned silence as the laws of magic themselves seemed to bend and rewrite before his eyes. In that moment, Granfell fully realized one thing with perfect certainty. No matter how monstrous Kareem Jeva's mastery over flame might be, it would still pale before this overwhelming convergence of power. A beam of absolute energy tore across the air with terrifying speed, racing straight toward the traitor and the demon at his side. A violet cataclysm wrapped in violent sparks crashed directly into Kareem Jeva's position. Granfell Claudi Arpius Romeo already knew the truth before impact. There was no dodging it, no room to escape. The enemy had no choice but to take that first strike head-on. Then, as the white smoke slowly peeled away, a demon emerged from the wreckage. Kareem Jeva lunged forward through the haze, eyes blazing with pure hatred, his body wrapped in hellfire fierce enough to feel like it could incinerate existence itself. Through the dimensional gate, he let out a manic, mocking scream that echoed like pure madness. The mages' faces twisted in terror as they watched. Impossible. He survived that without a scratch. Bursting through the portal, Kareem Jeva released his maximum thermal output, unleashing a flood of fire meant to erase every mage before him. Ben and Marcelo threw everything they had into their barriers, pouring in every last ounce of strength as they desperately tried to push back the inferno. Ben groaned under the crushing burden. This heat is insane. The shields are cracking. Marcelo gritted his teeth and forced himself to hold the line. What did you expect? This is the breath of Kareem Jeva. All around them, the entire tower seemed ready to drown in a sea of fire. Then a cold, mechanical warning rang out. Critical alert. At this rate, the magic tower will melt into slag. Kareem Jeva threw back his head and laughed triumphantly, his face twisted with savage delight as his power surged harder through the gate. So this is your tower's answer? A circus performance? He sneered. Let's see how long you insects can hold out against true sorcery. Then, without warning, razor-sharp glacial shards shot in from the other side and smashed into the flames, disrupting their spread. Kareem Jeva faltered for the first time, confusion flashing plainly across his face. Boom. A figure stepped out from the rift while Kareem was still channeling his spell. The mages shouted all at once, panic in their voices. Senior, watch out. It was Senios, wearing a calm, predatory smile that only made him look more dangerous. You lowly cur, Kareem Jeva. Your arrogance has blinded you. Kareem burned with rage while the others erupted in shocked murmurs at the sight of the breach. The Archmage is joining the fight. The cry spread through the room like wildfire. To Lee Hoyle, this felt like the absolute peak of a leveling mana moment. Granfell Claudi Arpius Romeo turned toward Marcello and spoke without hesitation. In this operation, I will accompany Lord Senios. Marcello's face instantly lost all color. What? Don't tell me. Just the two of you are going into their domain. He rushed forward in panic. Absolutely not. That's suicide. Granfell Claudi Arpius Romeo remained completely unmoved by Marcello's outburst. You know the reality as well as I do. We all have roles to fulfill. His tone left no room for argument. Marcello, I entrust the defense of the tower to you. Without looking back even once, he stepped through the dimensional gate, leaving the terrified mages behind him in stunned silence. The moment it sank in, voices exploded across the hall in confusion and alarm. Wait, just the two of them against Kareem Jeva? Shouldn't we send backup? No, we follow Guild Master Li Hoyle's orders. Do you all remember the mission? But this is Kareem Jeva. We're talking about the calamity of the Magic Tower. Forget it. Seal the gates immediately. We cannot let other players get dragged into this. Meanwhile, in the real world, a blonde woman and a bespectacled man stared at the news feed in total disbelief. What is this? Players all over the world gasped as the tower's gate was bound shut by golden chains and massive ceiling locks. The tower gate, it's been completely locked down. What the hell is happening inside that instance dungeon? Deep inside the inferno, the pressure only continued to rise. Kareem Jeva smirked, his voice dripping with contempt. Damn, Senios, you brought a rookie adventurer here to die? Or have you finally grown curious about the truth I hold? Granfell Claudi Arpius Romeo and Senios walked forward through the furnace-like heat without slowing, their steps calm and steady, showing not even a trace of fear before the tyrant's brutality. Senios scoffed coldly. Traitorous wretch, Kareem Jeva, your arrogance has gone too far. Veins bulged across Kareem Jeva's forehead as his teeth ground together in rage. What did you say? Senios remained cold as ice. Just because the world calls you Kareem Jeva, do you really think you have ascended into something greater? Did you sell your soul to demons just to clutch at that illusion of omnipotence? Kareem Jeva exploded with fury. A pillar of crimson fire blasted into the heavens, twisting the sky into massive vortices of heat. His eyes glowed a vicious red, hungry to devour everything in front of him. Then he spoke in a poisonous whisper. I thought you were different, that you would understand. But I was wrong, Senios. You are as small-minded as all the rest. Fine, then I will show no mercy. Absolute power is the only truth in this world. I will teach you. And that brat, the despair of true magic. Watching the monitors from afar, Sojin felt a chill crawl down his spine. The mana readings, they're spiking off the charts again. What? This mana signature, it's a rift. Parallel dimensional fractures are opening all over the globe. Granfell Claudi Arpius Romeo swept his gaze across the surrounding space, reading the distortion with sharp, unblinking focus. Space-time itself was twisting. The world around them warped and bent into a nightmare, turning everything into the kind of classic leveling mana territory that screamed danger from every angle. Then a system message flashed before him. Error. You have entered a fragmented rift. Suddenly, Kareem barked out an order with violent urgency. Akimpatham, open the gate. The demon grinned with open malice. As you wish, Lord Kareem. At once, a void of darkness split open in front of them, bleeding crimson light like a fresh wound torn straight through the world. Granfell Claudi Arpius Romeo's eyes snapped toward the new threat, his focus sharpening in an instant. Senios turned to Li Hoyle and gave his order without hesitation. Can I trust you to hold this flank? Granfell Claudi Arpius Romeo answered with a faint, confident smirk. No problem. Skill activated, natural enemy. In that instant, his combat efficiency against the demon race surged dramatically. He released a violent shockwave of mana that ripped across the battlefield and hurled the front line of the demon horde into the air like scattered debris. Kareem Jeva screamed in furious frustration, his voice cracking with rage. You little bastard. Then he unleashed a dense barrage of firebolts. The inferno roared forward with monstrous force, rushing straight toward Granfell Claudi Arpius Romeo, as though it meant to erase him from existence. But in the next moment, Senios stepped in front of it, his blue aura flaring so violently that the space around him seemed to tremble. he shouted with raw contempt. You filthy piece of scum. Your opponent is me, Kareem Jeva. Suffocating killing intent rolled off Senios in crushing waves as he drew up his magic and stood his ground without the slightest retreat. Kareem Jeva did not merely attack. He wore a warped, mocking grin that promised agony long before the blow ever landed. Senios, you deluded fool. Do you really think you are worthy of standing against me? Fire and ice are natural enemies. So tell me, how exactly do you plan to stop me with that pathetic magic of yours, the kind that melts before it can even finish freezing? Thick steam swallowed the battlefield all at once, turning the entire area into a blinding white haze. Granfell's expression hardened, but his eyes stayed razor-sharp, locked completely into combat mode. Inside that suffocating fog, locating Kareem Jeva was nearly impossible. Just as Granfell was analyzing the shifting battlefield, a menacing voice suddenly thundered from behind him. It was the demon Akimpatham, hellfire dancing wildly around his hands. Eyes on me, human. With a vicious grin, the demon launched a torrent of flame directly at Granfell, and in an instant the inferno seemed to swallow him whole. Akimpatham cackled in delight. Pathetic human. Burned to ash before you could even twitch. Fighting you was boring. But his celebration did not last even a second longer than it should have. As the demon turned to bark orders at the others, a hand suddenly shot out from the smoke and seized him in an iron grip. Demon army, advance. Go support Lord Kareem Jeva immediately. He never got a finish. Granfell's fingers dug harder into Akimpatham's skull, silencing him on the spot. In a cold, level voice, Granfell whispered, It's not that I couldn't fight back. I simply didn't need to. Cold sweat broke out across the demon's face. Impossible. How are you completely unharmed after taking a direct hit from Akimpatham's flames? The great Granfell smirked faintly. Please, a spark like that isn't even enough to itch. Then he added with calm satisfaction. Good thing I had Senior Kiko buff me in advance with high-tier fire resistance. Amid the roaring flames and choking heat, Kareem Jeva sensed the sudden disturbance on the other side of the battlefield. He glanced over, and a thought flashed through his mind the moment he realized Akimpatham had been caught. His expression darkened. It seems that Brad isn't just some ordinary rookie. He fights like the main character of a leveling mana story. But this ends now. Before he could act on that thought, a frantic shout from a unified guild member tore through the chaos and drew everyone's attention at once. The rifts are destabilizing. The Demon King's resurrection is imminent. The collapse rate is skyrocketing. At this pace, total destruction is unavoidable. System windows began flashing one after another in a frenzy, even as Kareem Jeva tightened his brutal grip around Senios' throat. Air itself became a luxury Senios could no longer afford. While endless hordes of demons poured from the gates behind him, Kareem Jeva declared with burning certainty, Soon, the ultimate truth and power I have sought will finally be mine. You never had a chance. Meanwhile, outside the tower, a red-haired man slammed himself against the sealed doors and cursed violently. Damn it all. Open the gates. The rifts are collapsing. What the hell are you bastards inside the tower doing? At least let us use the teleportation gates. I don't care if I die, but let me die fighting on the battlefield. Back inside, however, the situation had only grown more desperate. Kareem Jeva kept strangling Senios with merciless force, showing not a shred of restraint. Senios clung to consciousness by the thinnest possible thread. Drawing on every last drop of strength still left in him, he forced out one final explanation through ragged breath. Apologies, Kareem. I never intended to defeat you in a direct clash. Kareem Jeva's eyes narrowed at once, suspicion flashing across his face. What kind of nonsense are you babbling about? Then, suddenly, someone's monitor flashed with a new notification. Dimension fragment restoration complete. The message made him freeze, eyes widening in disbelief at the impossible turn of events. The rifts, they've suddenly been brought under control. Say what? Marcelo wasted no time. He immediately began shouting orders to the surrounding mages as the emergency shifted shape in front of them. Split into pairs and spread out. One team per rift, move now. We follow Commander Lee Hoyle's directives. Bang Grizz's team, take Rift 1497. The mages answered in perfect unison. Sir, yes, sir. Mathis, Team B, Rift 1498. Understood. Marcelo continued without a pause. Bellier, Yesha, and I will take Rift 1500. Even while he gave orders, the system kept hammering them with urgent alerts without stopping. Meanwhile, Karim Jeva's fury burned hotter than his own flames. And yet Senios still did not flinch, a cold, taunting glint still alive in his eyes. Let me show you one final masterpiece, Senios rasped. Something you'll wish you had never seen. At that moment, enormous pillars of water came crashing down from above, leaving Karim Jeva visibly stunned. Within the rushing cascade, a blurred silhouette began to form. Senios's figure sharpened through the torrent as he bent the water around Karim Jeva, guiding it into a tightening prison from every direction. The fire mage visibly struggled against the sudden flood. A water prison? Is this your pathetic trick? Karim scoffed, and a terrifying crimson aura exploded from his body as he clenched his teeth. Completely useless. That blinding red flare immediately caught Granfel's attention. His gaze turned ice-cold, and his mind began racing through tactical calculations at terrifying speed. He's making his move. Before Granfell could finish the thought, demons began manifesting from the red light itself. Each one radiated violent bloodlust the moment it emerged. Granfell clicked his tongue in irritation. TCH. In the same breath, he had already formed a plan. The demons are active again. Fine. Don't waste my time. Come at me all at once. He thrust his hand toward the sky, releasing a raw surge of power that shook the air around him. With terrifying, almost godlike speed, Granfell annihilated the demon horde in a single strike. His thoughts moved with pure efficiency. I don't have the luxury to duel trash mobs one by one. This is bad. If I stop here, the rift collapses. I need to get to Senios immediately, or he's dead. His expression darkened as the weight of the situation settled in. On the other side, Karim Jeva launched a savage counterattack, and through the shower of sparks, he bared his teeth in a cruel sneer. You really are pathetic, Senios. Did you honestly believe that your pitiful little ice could ever hope to freeze me? Karim Jeva sneered, and in the next instant, he exploded forward, unleashing a savage barrage of crushing strikes without giving even a breath of mercy. Fortunately, Senios relied on his speed and razor-sharp reflexes to barely slip through the deadly storm of attacks. Karim Jeva was already starting to look unhinged, his breath pouring out in scorching waves as if his lungs themselves had become furnaces. Look carefully, he spat. Your ice does nothing against my supreme flame. It just disappears. Then, all at once, something seemed to hit him like a bolt of lightning. His expression twisted, and he abruptly slapped a hand over his mouth in alarm. Confusion churned through his mind. Steam? Wait, what is this? That made no sense. In a blaze this intense, anything like that should have vanished instantly, without leaving even the faintest trace behind. No, this feeling is wrong. Something's off. Even though he stood in the middle of a raging sea of fire, Karim Jeva was suddenly gripped by pure panic. His hand stayed clamped tightly over his mouth, his eyes bulging with terror as he felt it clearly now, a bone-deep cold spreading outward from the very center of his body. His whole body began to tremble uncontrollably. Then Senios appeared behind him like a ghost, silent and merciless, his voice colder than winter itself. If the ice magic was only there to mislead your eyes, then what's really freezing you is the air you've been breathing. You've been inhaling my trap this entire time. At this very moment, your organs are turning into ice from the inside. Senios looked down at him with a sharp, triumphant glare that felt as cold as a blade of frost. Only then did Karim Jeva finally understand that he had stepped straight into his own grave. He lifted his head and glared back, his eyes burning with venom and hatred. You treacherous bastard. How dare you? If you do this, you'll be caught in the backlash too. Rage and panic clashed inside Karim Jeva's mind. Damn it. I knew this was going too smoothly. This wasn't a direct contest of power at all. He never meant to fight me head-on. He was quietly weaving a hidden spell to kill me from the inside out. A brutal Arctic wind swept across the battlefield, and through that frozen silence, Senios spoke in a calm, cutting voice. I told you from the beginning. I never intended to beat you in a contest of raw strength. The frost steadily spread across Karamziva's body, climbing higher and higher, until even the words in his throat began to freeze and die before they could fully escape. You, as Senios stood before him with unwavering resolve, the murderous intent in his eyes brought back a memory from long ago, sharp and vivid enough to tear through the present. Grandfell Claudi Arpius kept his eyes fixed on the scroll floating before him, while the elder mage's voice echoed through the chamber, calm, steady, and strangely final. This is a magic scroll I have nurtured within the magic tower for centuries. The power sealed inside it is enough to erase an entire dimension without leaving anything behind. Senios turned his gaze toward the exit as he spoke, and that small motion only deepened Grandfell Claudi Arpius's confusion. Why would you entrust something like that to me? He asked. The old mage answered with nothing more than a faint, unreadable smile that only made the moment feel heavier. My frost is the worst possible match for Karamziva's hellfire. By elemental law alone, my ice is destined to melt before his flames. At best, I can drag the fight into a stalemate, and even that is uncertain. Realistically, the odds of my defeat are overwhelming. If this situation spirals into a disaster, do not hesitate. Use it. He turned back and faced Grandfell Claudi Arpius directly. Grandfell tightened his grip on the scroll, hesitation and dread heavy in his eyes. You mean destroy both him and yourself? A request like that is. Before he could finish, Senios cut in with a single name. Adventurer Li Hoyle. The name struck Grandfell Claudi Arpius like thunder, and his eyes widened in unmistakable shock. And yet Senios remained colder than the ice he commanded, his face calm and unmoved, as though he had already accepted the end waiting for him. As I said, I have walked this earth for centuries. I can already feel the sand in my hourglass running out. Think of this as the final request of a dying old man. Back in the present, Karamziva reached out with a trembling hand, ready to drag his enemy down into death with him if he had to. Seeing that desperate movement, Senios answered with a chilling provocation, his voice low and merciless as he stared straight at him. How does it feel, Karamziva, to have your very senses shattered by absolute cold? As he spoke, the mage's silhouette began to blur in Karamziva's failing vision, a humiliation his pride could not accept. My movements, they're getting stiff. The frost has reached my core. Am I actually dying? The thought clawed through Karamziva's mind, but he rejected it instantly. No, someone like me cannot fall like this. Yet across from him, the light in Senios's eyes was already beginning to fade. I've done it. Senios's breathing slowed more and more until it nearly stopped, the frost claiming him as well. Even so, Karamziva's name continued to echo through that frozen moment, as if the battle itself refused to let go. Let us both sink into an eternal sleep beneath this white shroud. At that moment, two enormous pillars of ice burst violently from the ground and sealed their fates together. Then, without warning, a furious roar shattered the silence, and Karamziva's eyes blazed with crimson rage. How dare you? A gigantic dragon avatar forged from pure flame tore upward into the sky, radiating a terrifying pressure that made the entire battlefield feel as though it were about to split apart. The sudden eruption of blinding light forced Senios to recoil in shock, instinctively throwing up an arm to shield his eyes from the overwhelming radiance. When he saw Karamziva completely engulfed in surging fire, Senios cried out in disbelief, unable to hide the shock in his voice. Karamziva, are you burning your own internal organs just to melt the ice? Even he could hardly believe the madness of what he was witnessing. The only answer was raw, overwhelming arrogance. I am Karamziva, the immortal Karamziva. Nearby, Grandfell Claudi Arpius could only watch in stunned silence as the surrounding demons began collapsing to the ground one after another. Every single demon dropped dead where it stood. What is happening? Grandfell Claudi Arpius muttered in disbelief. Their life force, their mana, it's all disappearing. He lifted his gaze and saw streams of crimson energy streaking across the sky like rivers of blood, all of them rushing straight into Karamziva's mouth. Karamziva was devouring them without restraint. Karamziva roared like a madman, his voice shaking the battlefield. I am a demigod, the undying flame. Realizing the situation was spiraling completely out of control, Senios shouted at him. Stop. If you keep going, you'll lose your mind entirely. But the thing standing opposite him had already begun to move beyond humanity itself. Wrapped in hellfire and twisted into the shape of a dragon, it chanted like a broken creature that no longer understood anything else. I am Karamziva. I am Karamziva. Senios sank into despair as he watched that monstrous transformation unfold. No, I have nothing left. There's nothing more I can do. Then suddenly, a hand pressed firmly against his back, and in the same instant, a surge of fresh power poured into his veins like life itself had been forced back into his fading body. Senios gasped and turned in surprise. Behind him stood Grandfell Claudi Arpius, his eyes burning with firm resolve and not a trace of hesitation. My apologies for being late. Senios glanced back at him, panic rising immediately in his voice. This is too dangerous. Fall back now. But Grandfell Claudi Arpius did not even flinch. Yes, I know. This battle is a death trap, Grandfell Claudi Arpius said evenly. My mana reserves are nowhere near enough to challenge a demigod. Even so, a faint smirk slowly tugged at the corner of his mouth. An overwhelming aura of dominance wrapped around Grandfell Claudi Arpius as he stepped forward, every movement radiating a confidence so absolute that even the air around him seemed to tighten. But the equation changes now that he has stained himself with demonic energy. A system window materialized before him. Skill activated, natural enemy. Combat power increases significantly against demon-type targets. In the very next heartbeat, he launched himself straight at Karamziva with a devastating strike. I'll end this with everything I have. Grandfell Claudi Arpius's attack slammed into Karamziva head-on, and the dragon let out a scream so agonized and violent that it seemed to tear through the frozen air. Layer after layer of ice began sealing Karamziva away while he shrieked in frantic denial. No, you insignificant brat. Then, just as suddenly, the screams were cut off. Where Karamziva had stood only moments ago, there now remained nothing but a towering, silent statue of ice, cold and motionless like a monument to his defeat. A second later, Senios suddenly lurched forward and coughed up a spray of vivid red blood, the bright color staining the frozen ground beneath him. Grandfell Claudi Arpius rushed to his side, panic quickly taking hold. Archmage. His eyes dropped to the angry red burns crawling over Senios's arms, and his expression tightened. He's suffering from severe burns and extreme hypothermia at the same time. He pushed his life force far past its limit. Senios struggled to force the next words out between ragged breaths. Mage Lee Hoyle, activate the scroll. Grandfell Claudi Arpius flinched and looked toward the frozen statue. But the enemy is already completely sealed, Grandfell Claudi Arpius said, unable to hide his hesitation. Senios weakly shook his head. No, I've only delayed what's coming. Nothing more. Use the scroll. Once you escape, make absolutely sure he is destroyed. His breathing grew thinner, more fragile. Damn it, I have less than a minute left to live. To think I can't fulfill the ambition I carried my entire life with my own two hands. What a tragedy, and yet, strangely, a peaceful smile settled over his face, as though he had already accepted the end he could no longer avoid. Grandfell Claudi Arpius cut him off, his voice thick with grief and regret. Don't say things like that. You are the greatest cryomancer the tower has ever known. Senios's body sagged as he whispered out his final regret. If only I had reached the realm of absolute zero. Maybe, just maybe, I could have frozen him for all eternity, Senios said with a faint, weary smile. But that kind of miracle belongs to a fool's fantasy. To cast a spell on that scale, I would need Mug itself and every last drop of mana in existence. Even so, his fading eyes turned toward Lee Hoyle with quiet gratitude. The fact that I managed to seal Karamziva at all, that was only possible because of you, Mage Lee Hoyle. So no, I have no regrets. Burning away my life for this moment was worth it. Hearing that, Grandfell Claudi Arpius Romeo's expression turned firm as stone, and he slowly untied the binding wrapped around the magic scroll. In that case, Grandfell Claudi Arpius Romeo said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment, if your resolve is truly that strong, then I will bring Mug to you. Senios's eyes widened so much they nearly seemed ready to burst from their sockets. What did you just say? Before he could say another word, the scroll unfurled with a thunderous rush, releasing a blinding pillar of azure light so intense that it seemed to bend and twist time and space itself, forcing pure mana into tangible reality. It would be impossible with my mana alone, Granfell Claudia Arpius Romeo admitted without hesitation. There's no way I could ever reach that height by myself. But this scroll contains the power you spent centuries gathering. With that much strength in my hands, I can bridge the gap that should have been impossible. Then the world split open. A massive dimensional rift tore through space, and in the next instant, the three of them were dragged into an entirely different realm, one so alien and overwhelming that it felt detached from the laws of ordinary existence. Senio slowly raised a trembling hand and pointed into the vast emptiness before them, his fingers shaking not only from weakness, but from disbelief at what he was seeing unfold. You actually made real the greatest wish of my entire life, Senios whispered, his voice breaking under the weight of awe and emotion. How could I ever repay a debt like this? Then his eyes sharpened, and all that fading wonder turned into lethal resolve. Disappear from this world, Karamziva. The instant those words left his lips, a magnificent ice phoenix burst forth and swallowed the frozen enemy whole in a storm of blinding frost. But to truly understand the meaning behind that sacrifice, the story must return to their final private conversation. In that memory, Senios quietly extended the magic scroll toward Granfell Claudia Arpius Romeo, the gesture calm, deliberate, and impossibly heavy. The sight of it alone made the younger man hesitate. Granfell Claudia Arpius Romeo could feel, without anyone needing to say it aloud, that what was being handed to him was no ordinary burden. This is not a weight that any ordinary mage could carry, Senios said softly. It is a task meant only for someone chosen to bear it. Then he looked straight at him. You asked me why I chose you. It is because only you can do this for me. A small, gentle smile touched the corner of the old mage's mouth. As I speak to you now, the faces filling my mind are those of my family, the people who made my life a happy one. Marcelo, and the other children. They simply cannot do this, Senios continued, his voice growing more tender and more painful at the same time. They would cry. They would beg me not to die. They would hesitate when the time came, unable to throw away the life of a foolish old man like me. And in that single moment of weakness, Karamziva would awaken, and death would take every one of them. Warm memories flashed through his mind even as he spoke of such a grim end, and then Senios slowly turned his head and locked eyes with Granfell Claudia Arpius Romeo. That is why you are the right one, he said. You are an outsider, and you have the kind of steel in your heart that this choice demands. You are the perfect person to activate this scroll. His gaze did not waver. I know I am asking you to shoulder something cruel. Even so, can you do it? I am not asking this as a high mage, Senios said at last, the sorrow on his aged face cutting deeper than any dramatic speech could. I am asking as an old man who is terrified for the safety of his grandchildren. Silence settled heavily between them until Granfell Claudia Arpius Romeo finally answered, his voice low, steady, and without retreat. I can do it. I will do it. The answer was exactly what Senios had needed, and when he heard it, a bright, almost relieved smile spread across his face. Now, standing in the stillness of the chapel at his funeral, those final words seemed to linger in the air as though the old mage had spoken them only moments ago.